Millions of buyers are sitting on the real estate fence because they're waiting for the market to turn their way. But at the end of the day, you're ready to buy a house when you're ready to buy a house. When your walls are closing in on your growing family, or when the house is too big because your kids have moved out. When you're sick of paying someone else's mortgage, or when it's time to retire somewhere new. Buyers can't wait for a market shift. They need a clear path forward and wisdom from real people. That's where How to Buy comes in. You'll join me, Leo Ansoliaga, as we hear how to buy stories and advice from real buyers and the professionals who help them along the way in mortgage, real estate, insurance, financial planning, contracting, appraisal, and so much more. Now, let's jump into today's episode. Today, I'm joined by Yusuf Abugideiri, Co-CEO of the financial planning firm YeskeBuie. Yusuf's philosophy of financial planning is all about iteration and adaptation, treating plans as flexible frameworks that evolve with clients' lives. In this conversation, we dive into real challenges clients face, why the right time to buy is when you're ready, and how empowering clients with knowledge creates long-term relationships that matter. Well, what a treat it is to have Yusuf here on the podcast, an individual that is not only in the financial planning world, but someone that has intrigued me greatly regarding his story, the journey, the overall path that he's taken in his life professionally, financially. Yusuf, it's great to have you here today.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
You know, you have had the privilege, I've had the privilege of getting to know you in one of the local organizations that we are both members of. But you and I have had the privilege of sitting down, for a meal, discussing, kind of your overall journey. And I've actually even had you, speak to my team about how does Yusuf, land in the financial planning arena, right? Nobody wakes up on a Thursday morning and says, hey, I'm gonna go, tell people about, how to manage their finances and help them with this. So before we get started, man, I thought it would be awesome to maybe have you unpack a little bit of that story that you shared with us previously.
Yeah, I mean, I've been blessed. So much of this has been a gift to me by way of mentors or people coming into my life at just the right time. I happened to switch my major to finance as a junior at Virginia Tech. I was in one of the weed out classes that was just so happened to be taught by one of the program directors for the financial planning program at Tech. So, his name is Derek Clark. He saw my performance on a couple of the exams, pulled me into his office, asked me what I knew about financial planning. I said nothing. He gave me some information. Ultimately, I changed my focus within within my major of finance to financial planning. And then you fast forward a year later, and I'm speaking on behalf of the College of Business about being grateful for this career path. And Elisa Bowie, one of the co-founders of YeskeBuie, and our former CEO, is in the audience, with her daughter, who's an incoming freshman. So, I mean, none of that was planned out. There wasn't some, big board in my dorm room of like how I'm going to chart this path. I happen to be doing the right things, performing well in school, giving back to my community, and was noticed and then earned some opportunities. And so once I met Elisa, she offered me an internship. I ended up doing a short winternship between my fall and spring semester senior year, and they offered me a job at the end of that experience, and I joined the firm a few months after graduating and haven't looked back.
What a quick synopsis that is, because not only have you climbed up in this firm, but you're now one of the partners at your firm. A true story that encompasses grit, determination, motivation. You said something interesting though just now, which I thought it was brilliant, right? You know, everybody thinks that the plan that they have charted for themselves is ultimately going to be, the direction that they need to move forward in. But just like financial planning in your career, you can chart out any type of plan, but there are variables that have come along the way. You've obviously endured a lot of them, right? You've shared a lot of that, on stage and also, in front of my team. So talk a little bit about that because, that story that you just unpacked here, the synopsis, although amazing, it wasn't without any hurdles and challenges along the way.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, to your point, and, you and I met after I'd given this presentation, last summer, but, just mapping out the job titles, intern to assistant financial planner to just a full-on financial planner after I earned my CFP, senior financial planner, partner, chief investment officer, and now co-CEO. That's over 16, 17 years. Looking backward, yeah, you can chart it and it looks like a really clean, easy pathway and it's a nice story. And there were absolutely challenges along the way.
Mm,
Personal, professional, uh, macro, micro. You know, I've said many times it feels like my whole life happened while I was at the firm. I
mm,
started as a single man, ultimately got married. My wife Megan and I, we have a family now. We have an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old. All of the family building stuff. We had a baby during COVID.
mm,
So those kinds of considerations. We went from a dual income household to an income household. Um, those challenges, those growth moments. Becoming a business owner a year before the pandemic. Uh, learning that we were growing our family, shrinking our income, having, debt from taking on, the shares that we bought, and trying to figure out how to make it all work,
mm,
all while trying to make sure that clients are taken care of, during the day. Turnover over the years, employees coming and going. I mean, we've grown the team. In April of 2010, I'd been at the firm for 6 months. And at that point, the only people that worked here were Dave Yeske, our other co-founder and former managing director, Elisa, myself, and a client service administrator who's no longer with the team.
mm.
Now we're up to a team of 13, not counting our, retired founding partners. But that doesn't even capture all the ins and outs, along the way. So yeah, it's been unbelievable. And I use that word with intent. If I hadn't lived it, I wouldn't believe the story.
Mm.
Uh, but I remember it all, and I'm grateful for it all, even the challenging parts.
How inspiring is that? I understand full well, like, the journey that you have walked through over the years. I feel like, we blink and my kid is 9 now and my daughter is 6, right? And we have come a long way since the beginning of this journey. You mentioned something though just now that I think translates really well into the work that you're doing because, in the journey of a business, similar to the journey of a financial plan, there's a lot of hurdles that a person needs to, kind of overcome. The biggest one being the mental hurdle, right? Whatever the circumstances, whatever the problem, whatever the desired outcome, there are hurdles that all of your clients, whether business owners, self-employed borrowers, contractors, you name it, are dealing with, right? And so, at its core, how do you help them navigate those challenges, and how do you obviously help them and guide them to their desired outcome? Can you talk a little bit about your philosophy of business with your clients?
Yeah, yeah, especially with the financial planning process, we describe it as iterative. You go through it again and again and again over time with clients. It's not like We sit down in your first discovery meeting, unpack your history, learn who you are, what you're made of, what your values are. We take that qualitative information, we take all the quantitative information you give us, and we make an initial plan. But it's not like that's where the discovery ends, right? We have meetings at a minimum annually from there on, and we're continuously rediscovering you and continually learning more about who you are, who you're becoming, and how your goals may be changing.
Mm.
I mean, it's impossible for us to know how life is going to unfold before it actually happens. And yet we still have to make a plan, right? And so the process, the financial planning process, and the reason we call it iterative is yes, we make an initial plan and then we sharpen it again at a minimum every year to make sure that, the range of outcomes, which are broad at the beginning of the planning process, as you get older, the range starts to narrow until finally you converge on the path that you've been on and that now you will be on going forward.
Mm.
And that's a process that takes time and it requires care and focus on behalf of your financial planning team. And it requires this, again, never ending discovery process where we're continuing to learn more and more about who our clients are so that we can serve them as they are and not some past version of, who they used to be.
Powerful, powerful information. I was just telling you off camera how much I enjoyed, hearing Carl Richards speak at a recent
Yeah.
conference that you and I both were in. And, it dawned on me as he, put a dollar sign on the screen and asked the audience what that meant to them, how often we overlook one of the basic foundations that, is essentially tied to all financial decisions, and that's purpose, right?
Mm,
And, he talked about that for pretty much, at least a quarter of his conversation or presentation. And I wrote it down and I was like, that is such a powerful statement, because to your point, everybody has a plan, until we get punched in the face, right? Mike Tyson said that, right? In one of
yep.
his interviews. And if we're not constantly tweaking or sharpening, as you said, the actual plan, what good is it anyways, right? Like
Yeah.
the purpose, the foundation is the constant here. But the plan, as Carl said, is not just a linear plan. It's not just a straight line. I mean, it will be great, but then life happens, right? Things obviously happen, right? That perhaps weren't part of the actual plan. So
Hmm.
talk a little bit about that, right? Like, as you put together these plans for clients, you continue to sharpen it as you go along. Things change, right? And you adapt. But most importantly, the overall purpose usually is the constant in those conversations.
Yeah. Yeah. Pulling out a couple of quotes from Carl's presentation, the graphic or the illustration that you're referencing, he had drawn a line between 2 points, right? Like where you are and where you're headed. And he said the only thing that we know about this line, which represents the financial plan, is that it's wrong, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
that we have to continually revisit. And another thing that he said, and he's speaking to a room full of financial planners and other professionals, saying your clients pay you for your presence, not for solutions. And they also pay us for our solutions. We can recognize that. And however, what they're really valuing in the engagement is the engagement, the interaction, the conversation, the relationship. And so we build a plan, again, not to become prisoners of it, but instead so that we at least have a place from which we can pivot. Like, okay, we knew all of this stuff. Here are all the inputs. Here are all the assumptions. Now, something has changed. We've gotten punched in the mouth, right? We're pivoting, but at least we're pivoting from something. And so because you're pivoting from something, you can assess what still holds, what needs to change in this new reality or given the new circumstances or what have you. And now where are we going? How do we take the next best step given the information that we have? And that's the iteration. That's the part that gets repeated every year, multiple times a year, depending on if the client is in transition. And the source of transition can be any number of things, right? Health, work, compensation, so many different inputs. But if something changes in a material way, the plan has to adjust.
Yeah, I mean, and talk about the parallels in your journey, even in business. I mean, is that not the truth, in the journey that you kind of walked through over the last, decade or so, right? And and as you walk through that plan with clients, we still have questions. We still have iterations that happen. One of the biggest ones that obviously shows up early on is the ability of affordability, right? You
Mm,
and I currently live in according to certain reports, one of the wealthiest counties in America. Well, that obviously also has some interesting implications, in terms of affordability. Affordability, for new purchase buyers, people that are looking to get into the real estate market and housing in general.
mhm.
Affordability in the sense of like savings rates, right? Like, being able to put money away for college, et cetera. So talk a little bit about that, right? Because I think fear is something that I heard once said is that is literally an acronym: false evidences appearing real, right?
Mm.
There's a lot of false evidences out there around affordability, around being able to achieve quote unquote the American dream in this area, even in the counties that we live in. So, what kind of advice do you give, your clients that perhaps have kids that are thinking about this, or perhaps are thinking about, having kids, right? What are some of the advices that you're giving them when you're talking about this concept of affordability?
Yeah, I mean, a client dropped this gem on me years ago, and this is a person of means, really robust portfolio. But he said, Yusuf, you have to appreciate that it's never enough until you accept that it's never enough, and then you can find a way to make it enough. So you first have to realize and appreciate no one ever has enough money to do everything. No one can have it all. And that's all the way from the richest person in the world to the opposite. And there are trade-offs. And the reason our clients need us is to help them navigate the trade-offs. And so I use myself as an example. I'm a business owner, but I'm not a homeowner. Not yet.
Really?
My wife, Megan, and I, we had to make choices along the way. And we made the best choice that we could at every instance with the information we had available. And then we continued to make choices. We didn't have to send our kids to private preschool. They went to a Montessori in the area. But we chose to make that investment in their education because that was in alignment with our family's value system.
Mhm.
Did that potentially defer us, from buying a home a few years earlier? Yeah, maybe. But the kids are only a certain age for a certain amount of time.
Mhm.
So, you can buy a house later, but you can't redo preschool after your kid's in second grade. So those were just conversations that we had as a couple to say, okay, what do we want to do? We can't do everything. What should we do right now, given what we know? And each decision compounds upon itself, and you build from there. But we approach the discussion internally, within our own household, internally within the firm, when we're planning for the firm, and with our clients. Is you just have this appreciation that okay, you're either limited by time or by resources or both. So given that, how do we make the best possible choice for you? And it gets back to the individual's value system. Um, and that we only learn that by way of doing the discovery in the way that I talked about earlier, and then just trying our best to make the best possible decision each time around.
Man, this thing's getting better and better. I think, that is such great wisdom, man, because, the number one question that every single buyer that, kind of is thinking about entering the market asks is this the right time to do this?
Mm,
Right. And it's an interesting question that we get, I mean, we get on a regular basis from first time home buyers. Now, you always are going to have, a self-serving professional is going to say, yes, absolutely, it's the best time, right? And I think
Right.
that's, that can be true potentially, right? But what we say is the right time is when you're ready,
Mm,
right? Regardless of what the market is doing, regardless of what interest rates are doing, regardless of what housing is doing, you're ready when you're ready, right? Now, of course, there's some indications, right? If you're renting a property and you start to kind of see the rents go up, over time, you're like, oh my gosh, man, we really have to spend a lot of money, in the actual property over the years. Okay, that could be an indicator that makes sense for you. Another one could be, you know what? I'm tired of having to call our landlord and asking him for permission to, to put a
sure.
mirror on the wall. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? Like he's taken for, or she's taken forever to get this, this washer fixed, right? So like that's another piece. But you do it when you're ready. I read a book one time that gave a formula that I thought that I teach to first-time home buyers on a regular basis. And here it is. It says this: your current dissatisfaction times your future promise, or your future promise of what the future could hold in this home, needs to be greater than the cost plus the fear of this investment.
Mm,
So you buy a house when you're ready to buy a house, but that is a really good formula to put your
absolutely.
household through to see if it's the correct time for you, right?
Yeah.
Because your current dissatisfaction times the future promise of what you're looking for needs to be greater than the cost and the fear of owning a house. Because yeah, I mean, to your point, I mean, maybe you're in a phase right now where you're building a business. Maybe you're
Mhm.
in a phase right now where you're not even sure if you're going to be in this area for long, right? Like maybe you work for the government, maybe you're going to be
Sure.
relocated, etc. The right time to invest in real estate is when you're ready.
Yeah, no disagreement from me. I mean, and I love that framework because it puts people kind of in the driver's seat and they get to make that decision with their eyes wide open and say, here's what you're evaluating on one end, and here's what you're comparing it to on the other end. And this is what we learned, in all my training in economics. People are going to continue to do what they've been doing, that inertia,
Mhm.
until or unless the incentives to do something else outweigh the disincentives of switching away from whatever it is that they're doing. And that's, everything that you just said.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think though to an earlier point in piggybacking on what you just said, it's imperative to surround yourself with people that will help you and guide you in that process, right? I mean, I think, financial planning, is not, the marketer or the influencer online, right? Like, but I would
Right.
argue it's a more important relationship that a person should be building, right? When you're looking to invest in real estate, yeah, absolutely. The real estate professional is important. Um, and we have surrounded ourselves with incredible professionals, not just locally, but nationwide. And side note, you have to work with the top tier professionals in your marketplace in
Mm,
order to succeed, because that's a freebie. But I would say the financial component is the most important thing, right? So whenever I meet with first-time home buyers, people that are looking to do this for a first time, or even investors, right? They're like, "Well, how much can I afford?" No, no, no. Wrong question. Like you have you have to have a plan because we can't tell you what the affordability for your household should be, right?
right.
We can't dictate. Fannie and Freddie, Ginnie Mae cannot dictate just because the allowances are these particular thresholds. That doesn't mean that that's where you need to go, right? Ultimately, we love food with our meals. We want to make sure we send these kids to college. We want to make sure we have enough in retirement to retire. And so, although it's important to meet real estate professionals, real estate agents, I would argue sitting down with someone like yourself, sitting down with someone like our practice is the most important piece because once you have a plan in place, once you can lay those items out, you're not letting anyone else dictate what you can or can't afford. You already have a plan that you need to execute on.
Yeah. I mean, I completely agree with you. You need to get feedback. You need to talk to people. You need to test ideas. We say, we're good people to think with,
Mm.
and that we like to walk an idea around the block and just see, what are the implications if we make this decision or that decision. And it's only in the thinking through and the talking through that you really find out, what the real parts of the decision are that are pulling at you or pushing you,
Mm,
the key factors or the key drivers, as it were. Um, and we say often to clients, our effectiveness is a function of the information that we have available to us.
mhm,
And so the longer we know you, this is to back up your point about, the value of this relationship. We consider these relationships to be for life, and not just for life beyond. We want to work with your kids, we want to work with your kids' kids, and on and on. The longer we work with you, the more we know about you, the more we understand you, and the better we can advise you. And so often it's less about, again, to another point you made, oh, can you afford to do it? So do it. More often, the value that we provide to our clients is, you can afford to do this. However, maybe you shouldn't. And here's why.
mm,
Or could you afford to have a second home? Yeah. But might it make more sense to just rent a property for the time that you're going to be there? Keep your fixed costs lower. Just one example. Um, but yes, it's about the relationships, and completely agreed. The relationship that you have with your financial planner is at or near the top of the list in terms of importance and value.
mm. I love that. And, to kind of close this loop, I would say, and the audience is probably have heard this on so many occasions, but I'm going to continue to talk about this. It's also process, right? Like,
Mhm.
it's amazing that people are, that are out there that have great presence online, incredible, real estate marketers that exist. But I want to know, and every consumer should know what's under the hood,
Yeah.
right? Every consumer should say things like, that's amazing, but can I see your written out process, the detail, step by step analysis in terms of what I'm going to experience, not just at the beginning until you get my yes, but also post after we're done
Yeah.
with this transaction. And I would say your industry as a whole, and there's obviously outliers in this statement, but your industry as a whole has done a really good job of laying out the actual process, not just before, during, but also after. So I would say process, having a very detailed process is imperative. Yusuf, do you disagree?
I don't disagree at all. I'll play with some of the words you use, financial services industry, financial planning profession that exists within that industry. And then we as professionals absolutely are required to show up for our clients. We're fiduciaries. And so we have to give them the very best, right? To the highest standard of care. And for us, transparency is a big part of that. And so, we're going to design a financial plan for you, and we're going to show it to you, and we're going to tell you that it works or that it doesn't. But then we're going to show you how it doesn't work, and we're going to explain to you why it doesn't work or how it works and why it works.
Mm,
And we say all the time, our purpose as members of this team at YeskeBuie is to empower people to pursue their live big life. And each word matters, but it's the empowerment. And you can't have empowerment without the knowledge, without the understanding of, well, how does this plan work? How do I work as a part of this plan? How do I live this plan? Um, that's something that we spend a lot of time on with our clients, is making sure they're clear on the role that they play. Because at the end of the day, we can build a plan. They have to live it. If they live it, great, then it works. If they don't, then it doesn't. And if they're not living it, we have to understand why, and then figure out what needs to be adjusted.
amazing. I was just on another podcast, and one of the interviewers asked me, what do you suppose, is the greatest advice you can give to the financial planning community? And I said, look, holistic planning is a great phrase, right? But I want to understand, what does that mean for me? Because to your point, the role that you play, the role that, we play on the liability side of the balance sheet is not the hero's role, right? There was a great book called, Story Brand, To Build a Story Brand by Dan Miller. And that was my advice to her. I would say everybody needs to read that book. Our role in this is to be the guide. The hero in the
Yes.
story is the consumer, is the client, right? They're the ones who have the actual problems that need solution and wisdom. And literally our role, whether it's on the asset side of the balance sheet or the liability side of the balance sheet, is to essentially guide them to their preferred outcome. And I think process, relationships, and ultimately execution is how that's accomplished.
Agreed. Agreed completely. Our job is, that we consider our clients to be the experts of their own life. We see a small slice. We might meet with them for a few hours a year, talk to them on the phone for a couple more hours, exchange dozens of emails maybe, and that's this much of their year, of their life. And so it's our job to extract as much information as we can so that we can be a good guide. And then, yes, empower them to go out and do all the things they have to do, to make the dreams or the aspirations their reality.
Amazing. Well, Yusuf, you and I could sit here for 2 days and impart some incredible wisdom in the audience. But in closing, where is it that people can find you? How can they contact you? What is the best way to connect with you?
So go to our website. It's www.yebu.com. If you go to the About Us segment, if you click on any one of our team members' bios, our names are linked. They'll send us a direct email. But that's probably the easiest place to find us. And, we'd love to talk to you.
Amazing. Well, Yusuf, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.